introduce themselves shortly. You'll note that we are now recording. So if that is okay with you, hit got it. And we will be able to share this with those who weren't able to join us today. If you wouldn't mind, please introducing yourselves in the chat. That way we can follow up with you if you, if you have any questions later on about the statement of interest or any of the things that we're going to talk about today and getting involved with the voter-friendly campus project. So if you would introduce yourselves, that would let us know who's in the room, which is fantastic. And in the meantime, I will ask the speakers on today's webinar to introduce themselves. So I'll just go in order of who I have on my agenda here. So I'll throw it over to Mike first.
Hi, Mike Burns, he, him. I'm the National Director for Fair Election Center's Campus Vote Project.
Great, thanks. And I have Chuck next.
Hi, I'm Chuck. I'm the Midwest Regional Manager, and I use the he, him pronouns.
Thanks, Chuck. Next, I have Janae.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janae. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the voter-friendly campus intern.
Great. Thanks so much, Janae. Rahila.
Everybody, my name is Rahila Ahmed, and I'm the Deputy Director of Campus Vote Project. And I go by she, her pronouns. Thank you.
Awesome. And then Colette next.
Hi, I am Kola Zuffer. I'm the Communications Director, and I go with she, hers pronouns.
Great. Katie, do you mind introducing yourself?
Happy to do so, thanks. Katie Montgomery, Director of Government Relations at Tri-C, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you.
Great, welcome, Katie. And then finally, last but not least, Nicole.
Nicole is running a bit behind, but she will be on soon.
No worries. Well, then I will throw it over to my colleague, Mike, to give us a little bit of a history of the voter-friendly campus project.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so really excited. Thanks for everybody for joining us. Gosh, time is just flying by. I can't believe that we're already so far from the 2020 elections, but excited to maybe share a little history of the VFC program and kind of how we've gotten to where we are, and then some great content from all of my colleagues that just introduced themselves about what we learned from 2022, and also looking forward to kind of the next iteration of the voter-friendly campus, which is already started and will be very active next year during the 2022 midterm years. So big picture goals, the Campus Vote Project and NASPA came together to start working on the voter-friendly campus a couple of years back. We'll get to the timeline in another slide, but really wanted to work with institutions to help them develop plans that would coordinate administrators, faculty, and students in kind of doing, political democratic engagement type work. We noticed that, we were connecting with a lot of different folks on campus, but there also ended up being a lot of silos. So wanted to really try and think through, like, how do we get those folks together? And part of that meant like coming up with some templates and some processes where folks could create documentation that could be shared over time and shared across groups, and then talk about how to build strong coalitions to both provide input into those plans and then help execute them and reflect on them together. So that is sort of kind of how we landed at this process that we've been trying to iterate on now for a couple of cycles. So a little bit of that history, we got together, we've been starting to work with some other partners in the space to sort of develop like a checklist and some sample plans of what folks were doing, kind of back around like the 2014 elections was when I got involved in this work, and we started to really see a lot of folks kind of come together on that concept. So we decided to try and do the voter-friendly campus for the first time around the 2016 presidential elections. We had 83 campuses who kind of signed up in that first sort of cohort and kind of went through all the steps in just that 1 year of kind of, submitting a statement of interest, drafting the campus plan, like putting it to work, and then reflecting on that and submitting their report about how things went and what they wanted to do in the future. A much smaller team of folks involved in that as well. CVP was in a lot fewer states. We had a lot fewer national staff, So just a couple of folks read and reviewed all those campus plans and responded to those reports, trying to support those folks. but then also decided, like when we got to the end of that, realized, we should really try and kind of collect up some of this information and knowledge from kind of across these campuses, from across the country, a lot of different institution types and a lot of different states with a lot of different kind of electoral compositions going on sort of what was the laws, who was running. Wanted to be able to sort of share that out with folks and highlights what we saw were both some common challenges across all that diversity, but then also some really great highlights and examples of different innovative things that folks had thought up and done with that. So put out the first voter-friendly campus report after 2016, started thinking about what do we need to do and how do we improve that going forward in the future. And in 2018, saw some great growth, ran the program for the second time, kind of had folks, 123 campuses kind of go all the way through, even in a midterm year. So like really exciting to see, I think, as you can tell, hopefully in what we'll talk about today, is that like in our mind, this is work that happens every year, even though it happens every year and the kind of VFC is on a 2-year cycle, so that we can keep up that momentum, so that we can keep kind of learning and building on these things without kind of losing that, where we have, if we were only doing this type of programming every presidential election cycle, we'd miss whole cohorts of students on some institutions, the way they matriculate. So kind of have this process set up where we kind of keep iterating. So even in a midterm year, even in an off year, we're always trying to reflect and think ahead, so that the program can keep building and we can try and reach more campuses and more student voters. And then I'll just share kind of 2020, a crazy year. A lot happened. We're going to get to some of that in just a couple of slides too, but really phenomenal. The program almost doubled from 2018 to 2020, 235 campuses participated, completed, did all the steps, submitted their reports, and we learned just like some really phenomenal resilience that we're really proud of, that in spite of the pandemic and all the challenges that had, a lot of the issues that were going around the ability to vote and kind of some divisiveness within our politics, that so many folks were still so committed to helping the newest members of our democracy navigate that and participate. So some really awesome stuff we have to kind of share out now, kind of looking back through all those plans and all those reports that folks shared. So really appreciate that.
Our next voter-friendly campus report will be coming out very, very soon. And we're gonna walk through what different parts of the report will talk about, and some of the key takeaways from the most recent voter-friendly campus cohort. The biggest, and all of you know this, was just how 2020 was just an incredible changing time because of COVID. But we saw so many positive things that came out of it, of campuses still finding ways to get students registered and get students out to the polls. We saw examples of big campuses, small campuses, every single campus who was like, okay, this is the space that we're now in. How can we adapt our campus action plan and everything we've known about getting students registered into the polls and change them into this virtual environment. In addition, we saw more changes to election laws than people who've been doing this for a long time have seen before. And even with all the negatives of 2020, we saw the largest turnout of voters in the entire country's history. And part of that included 235 campuses that were named named into the voter-friendly campus program. This is no small feat, considering the constant changes that all of us went through, and not even just the virtual environment, but we saw state after state that changed their primary, changed how people could vote, consolidated polling locations, and with what some could view as attack against voting, young people in our campuses, we kept pushing back and we got out to vote?
So just like Chuck talked about, the pandemic kind of forced everyone to go from what was traditionally an in-person, very face-to-face interactive process of registering and educating young voters to get involved, to all of a sudden, basically overnight, we have to do everything virtually. So you saw a lot of people in institutions who had to kind of from the ground up build up a social media presence that was more active, more engaging with students and young people in particular. You saw a lot of people, using Google Hangouts or Zoom webinars and summits as well to try to fulfill either commitments that they had previously made for voting summits or things of that nature. Things like presidential debate watch parties were moved from in-person events to, of course, online. So you saw a lot of really valiant and also innovative efforts to take those same really important voter registration, education, and engagement efforts and put them into an online setting that's safe and accessible, so that we don't lose that momentum during a general election in which we wanted more people than ever to turn out, because that's always the goal every election. And so you saw students have to get really innovative and also very intentional and strategic about what they do instead of tabling or instead of in-person watch parties or instead of canvassing in person as well. So I know you guys have all lived this the past year, so you know everything that we're talking about. But I think that these methods would still be important moving forward, even once we're out of a pandemic setting. And so they're nice things to keep in mind.
So another key part to being a voter-friendly campus, and just doing this at your campus, is the importance of your campus coalition. And with that coalition, 2020 reminded us how important it is to have in your campus plans a succession. So if some person retires from the campus or would lose their job or go on to something else, we don't want this work just to end because that person is no longer at the campus. So as you're starting to think about 2022, you should put into your action plan, if so-and-so who's the chair of our coalition would have to step down, who's going to take charge? And I'm not just talking about the person who chairs or co-chairs, all the other positions as well. It's really important to have a succession plan in place. And to us, that comes back to institutionalization, because we know, okay, if and when this person is done in this position, then we know who's going to step up. And I don't need to go into this, but I think it's just very well obvious. A successful coalition is a diverse coalition. So the upcoming voter-friendly campus report will talk about how important having a succession plan is and how important your campus voting coalition is to helping your students register and get out to vote.
And along with having succession in your campus plan, it's also important to think about how you set goals and how you report progress on those goals. With students and administrators in and out constantly, it's important to have continuity between academic years and between people in charge of those coalitions as well. So goal setting is a super effective way to kind of keep progress and keep check of your commitment to democratic engagement and to getting students involved in voting. So you should probably have both long-term and short-term goals. Short-term could be semester or academic year specific, and long-term goals could be far-reaching. Reporting is really important. So it's, you have to think about, we need tangible ways to gather this data. We need to be able to report numbers, and use in-solve data to kind of assess our progress. And that can look different from campus to campus. And then also, whenever you're actually reporting your progress on these things, it's important to remember that future students and administrators will be looking back at this, and also people who are not familiar with your institution or your voting coalition at all could also be using it as reference or like to look back on in the future.
All right, so next we'll be talking about strategies and tactics, and there are 4 different subcategories under this that we'll be diving into. I'll be covering voter registration and voter education, and then we'll also go into voter turnout and student voter advocates as well. So when we're talking about voter registration, as we know, a student's excitement and intention to participate in the democratic process by voting can often be cut short close to election day, when they realize that they aren't registered to vote or are not registered at their current address. In the case of 2020, this already confusing process was further complicated with last-minute changes, both in state laws and in student addresses due to the pandemic. So institutions that we've worked with to stay ahead of the constant adjustments we're providing their students with the most accurate and up-to-date information as possible. In our report that's going to be coming out, we've highlighted a couple of different campuses that have found unique ways to address the challenges around voter registration, and I just wanted to give you a couple examples here today as well. Central Lakes College in Minnesota contacted every student in multiple ways, including texting every student 3 times throughout the semester and making additional contact multiple times through classroom announcements. Rawlings College in Florida were able to overcome this challenge by hosting voter registration events and challenges through Turbo Vote, in which they registered nearly 400 students. And at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they worked hard to ensure students had access to voter IDs. And so our campuses really made sure students were able to register to vote despite the pandemic. And when plans for on-campus voter registration at the beginning of the semester didn't necessarily pan out, campuses got creative and pivoted to new and unique ways to engage students and register new voters, to the point where many of the methods that were implemented during this time were so successful that folks are considering to refine them and replicate them post-COVID for registration efforts. And that's a pretty big win. When we're talking about voter education typically includes a range of activities, from providing details about the voting process to candidate information to hosting deeper political discussions on issues that are impacting students. So in 2020, voter education took a very different field, as faculty and administrators had to provide voter education on a range of issues, from new rules about early and absentee voting to campaigns centered on addressing disinformation. And then also, due to the pandemic, many campuses had to provide this education online and in virtual environments due to remote student learning. And so an example of a campus that tried to address this challenge is Grand Valley State University, where they hosted a multi-institution civic empowerment symposium as a part of their voter education efforts. I think what was really crucial about voter registration was that it was an important part of the 2020 cycle. With the COVID-19 related short notice changes throughout the cycle that were affecting deadlines to polling location affects, it was really important to make sure that we were providing students with ample guidance and that institutions were also doing the same. And so there was a lot of effort to make sure that the information was provided. And many campuses also went to provide details on topics beyond the voting process, such as the ballot, the election, candidates, and political topics relevant to their location and demographic, and did so through social media and websites and mailers and in-class engagements, things like that nature. I'll pass it over to my colleague to talk about voter turnout.
All right, so the next strategy that we covered was voter turnout. Voter turnout is important because while registration is the first step, we want to make sure that students are actually following through and getting their votes cast in the ballot. A lot of times students are lacking proper information about casting their vote and about the various things that they need in order to complete that final step. COVID just made that a lot more difficult with polling stations being changed, locations being changed, etc. One of the campuses that we saw shows some real progress despite COVID in this category was the Community College of Philadelphia, who made sure to hold a lot of information sessions for their students and even had a day of service that the campus was closed for both students and faculty members so that people can actually go out and vote. Altogether, they held 43 events during the general election, which is an amazing number of things to be able to host, given all of the craziness that was 2020. Then the next category is the student voter advocates. It is super important to be getting the students themselves involved in the actual process of encouraging other students to vote. Students themselves are the best advocates for their peers, and that their engagement is crucial to to bringing up our voting rates from when we see students. That whole thing was even more important when we were talking about students who are now displaced from actually being on campus because of COVID and having to do most of their interactions virtually. It's no secret that the students are generally more tech savvy than some of the folks who may be a little bit out of touch with it, the most current, things that are going on. So we found that students were very innovative in coming up with ways to still continue civic engagement in this virtual space. One of the campuses that we wanted to highlight been doing really good work here was Tarleton State University in Texas. And they made great efforts to kind of foster the work of students and make connections. And they had a dedicated coordinator position who facilitated in the communications for both the public as well as their students, which was really important, having that person as the go-to for this work. Next, we'll pass it on to Jill.
Thanks, Cola. So we are excited that we are at the point where you can join us now that you know all of the different pieces that go into this process and what we focus on and what our goals are, and working with the various campuses across the country. We're really excited that we're beginning the process anew. So we are getting ready, as Rahila mentioned, to issue our report and findings about what went well and the challenges and how those challenges were overcome by our voter-friendly campus partners in this work in the last election. But we are ready to begin the whole process again. So there is a timeline that we just went by, but I'll go into detail here and give you the first two steps in the process. The first one is that we would ask you to submit a statement of interest. This is your opportunity to look back at what your coalition has accomplished in previous election cycles, to brag about what you've done, all the good work that you all have accomplished on your campus. Also to take a look at what challenges and struggles your coalition might have had in ways that you could do better moving forward. That's really an opportunity for you to tell us how we can support you as a voter-friendly campus as you go through the process. And then looking forward, what are the short-term and long-term goals that you would want your coalition to accomplish in 2022 and beyond? So again, thinking through, we have some, immediate next election cycle types of goals, but long-term, here are some things that we want to accomplish. And then also in looking forward, again, thinking about all the good work that you've done, how do you intend to build on that progress that you've made in previous election cycles, or even just in everyday work that you all do? So that is due January 31st. And if you have questions about that, there's information there at the bottom, info@campusvoteproject.org, or any of us on the that are speakers today can walk you through that. So we look forward to getting your statements of interest. And then the second one is the action plan. So that is, you submit your statement of interest, we email you back and say, hey, fantastic, so glad to have you as part of this process. And then in May, you would get your coalition together and come back to us with an action plan. And again, this is talking about all the things that we've, just sort of gone over. We talk about coalition building, who's in your coalition, who isn't, who should be. How are you incorporating equity and inclusion into the work that you're doing, and centering that, and making sure that you're reaching out to students that may be underrepresented in some of your NSOLV data, or that you just know aren't participating at the rates you'd like them to. How do you intend to increase voter registration, also voter turnout? And how do you intend to engage your students around voter education? Whether that's local elections, or there's a really buzzy governor election in your state. How is it that you intend to engage students around some of the opportunities they have to flex their right to vote? And then also institutionalization. So your action plan would incorporate things like, here's how we intend to build on this year, but then we want to make it systemic, or we want to incorporate this into systems and strategies that the institution has, that we can incorporate this work into that, so that it doesn't go away when there's turnover in staff, or like a pandemic, for example. So with that, I will turn it back over to Cola to talk through steps 3 and 4.
All right, so the next step is actually putting that plan into action. And we have a lot of various civic holidays that we think are really staples that you can use to build the momentum of this work. Constitution Day was just passed. Tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day. The following week, we have National Voter Education Week, and so on and so forth. And these holidays happen pretty much every year. There are no off years. So we can constantly be using these events to be doing this engagement work and keeping voting at the top of our students' minds. And then after step 3 is, after you've done all this work throughout the year, you're going to move on to step 4, which is a reflection, where we're going to kind of take a step back, see what worked, see what wasn't working quite so well, and put it all down into paper and get that turned in with your report. We then will use the Voter Friendly Campus team then uses that report to complete our Voter Friendly Campus report, which helps more campuses, and so on. The cycle continues. After that last piece is in, we can celebrate and see our voter designations for the next cycle, which will be in March of 2023. I'm going to pass it over to Mike to now introduce some of our speakers for today.
Awesome, thanks, Cola. Yeah, so excited to be joined by, for folks who were here at the outset, we've got Dr. Katie Montgomery from Cuyahoga Community College, fondly known of as Tri-C, to kind of share some of the great stuff that they did in 2020 to cope with the pandemic and still keep students engaged in the election.
Great, thank you, Mike. Thank you for the promotion too. No doctorate yet, but we'll keep it on the list.
You're just so wise. I just assume.
That's lovely of you. So as you just heard, I'm Katie Montgomery, Director of Government Relations at Tri-C. I've got about 7 hours. Oh, wouldn't that be awful? 7 minutes to talk, and I've timed it out. So let's see how we do here. So first off, on behalf of the college and the cohort of students serving as Democracy Fellows with their office this year, I wanted to take a moment and first thank the teams working together in the Voter Friendly Campus program, Campus Vote Project and NASPA. You make it possible for us to join the conversation today, but also to deploy the Voter Friendly Campus designation to support our year-round efforts. And to those who might be wondering, we do year-round efforts and campaigns for every primary and general election. It's been an interesting year in Ohio. We've had 3 special primaries as well this year. So first, to simply introduce you to our institution, Cuyahoga Community College, AKA Tri-C. Earlier this year, we had the honor of being ranked as one of the top 5 community colleges in the country. So good team here. We're also Ohio's largest and oldest community college, serving just over 50,000 students a year. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio, in Cuyahoga County, go Browns, with 4 campuses and 10 other locations along America's North Coast. So when we think about voting in America, it's a great equity concept, one vote for every person, whether they're homeless or billionaire, and I love that. But the reality, as we all see, can be quite different. So what we do at Tri-C, working with our students, faculty, and staff, we're committed to helping put together the equity platform back in place because we see it break down along the way. Student civic engagement is a key tenet of our college. We know that 85% of our students stay to live and work in our region. So these are our future voters, the people determining Tri-C's future. In fact, as we're a levy supported institution with a levy vote every 5 years. And we also want them to feel really comfortable and empowered as citizens of our community. So we're making good progress. We're nationally ranked in the area of student civic engagement and voter education. We are an Ask Every Student co-designer campus, and we're thrilled to be invited to the first inaugural cohort, the only 2 or 4 year institution in Ohio that joined. So that was really just a wonderful experience. We're a national and county partner in National Voter Registration Day, our collective holiday tomorrow. And we're so proud to be a voter-friendly campus, and we're in our 2nd round with this honor. So it's through Campus Vote Project that our scholars join our government relations team to serve as Democracy Fellows for a calendar year. It's a competitive process, and we're in our 4th and largest cohort with 5 students serving. When the Democracy Fellows program and the students began at Tri-C, we searched for a legacy project that would serve as the foundation of the fellowship. After a series of listening sessions across campus, we discovered that there are many reasons why the one vote, one person model falls apart. Some of our students may be first in family or first in country to vote. And as we know, not all countries have fair elections, and that voting experience there can certainly hamper voter participation here. Also, given all the illness in our country the last couple of years, sometimes there's simply not enough bandwidth in the family to teach the next generation to vote. That's another piece that we hope to pick up and help carry. But perhaps one of the most pervasive reasons we saw was loss of hope. If you live in an underserved area, hope can disappear. And we come across students all the time that think my vote doesn't matter. So we work to restore that hope. And we do it with facts, stats, and peer-to-peer discussions. For example, one thing we share, and hopefully your Secretary of State share this kind of information too, in the state of Ohio, over a 5-year period, 141 races ended in a tie or were decided by one vote, literally one vote changing the world. And that's become a powerful message to our students. So we put all these things together in an annual pop-up voter education project we've dubbed the Voting Experience. And at its simplest, it's civic education by students for students. In the first 2 years, it was land-based. We created a series of stations in a pop-up setting that took students through every aspect of voting, from registration, finding, researching a ballot, how to make a voting plan, and actually voting in a Board of Elections voting booth. And they're great partners in our efforts to do these things. We also created a voter information card as our handout, something that stayed with the program, providing key info from the event to our students. Chuck, I'm wondering if you could pull up that voting card that I sent you. There it is, yay. So basically you'll see we put together everything in one place, from key dates and nonpartisan sites to our hashtag, so that that information stayed with them. We purposefully made it bigger than a business card that was on the student suggestion. So they said, we'll use it as a bookmark, but it will pay attention to it at that size. We also started with a card encouraging students to write down what their voting plan is, because our statistics show a person with a voting plan is 19% more likely to vote, which is just an amazing stat. So how have we done? Our first year, we had over 600 student stops. The next year, we surpassed 1,300. And then for the 3 years prior to COVID, we led the county in National Voter Registration Day registration. So it was really going well in these land-based events. Our third year, 2020, COVID came to call, as we all know. So as a few people have mentioned, we threw the lid off the box and got creative, taking everything mobile. We went fully virtual and recreating the stations of the voting experience with student-led videos that became a playlist on YouTube. And YouTube was chosen because it has greater accessibility, and we still struggle with bandwidth accessibility in Cleveland. So all told, between student text opens, emails, and social media campaigns across all platforms, and help from a couple viral videos, we reached over 360,000 through our combined efforts. So of course, we'd like to keep adding to that total, see how we do this year, and maybe put a little bit more of that hope and equity back in place. Our goal is to continue to build the platform of knowledge that our students and community members need, honestly, to keep that equity platform of voting in place. As I think we all know, if no one teaches you how to do it, it can be a daunting experience. In service of that goal too, we've added some specialty segments to the voting experience, really centered on that one vote makes a difference. Last year, we started a series called When a Few Votes Made a Difference, having our students interview elected officials who won by less than 10 votes. And in fact, one of those interviews last year is one of our congressional candidates this year. So again, driving home the power of single votes. And this year we have a powerful piece called Why I Was Quiet from Judy, who's a democracy fellow serving this year from Nigeria. She created the video in response to working as a poll worker in America last year. One of the volunteers asked her why she was quiet all day. As it turns out, she was taking in the power of seeing a true democracy of action, to seeing young people around here seem very convinced that their votes will be counted after seeing the opposite take place in her home country. So we invite you to check out both the 2020 and 2021 editions of the voting experience. It is a playlist on our YouTube channel. It's linked at the bottom of every page on our website, which is tri-c.edu. And I think that's where I'll leave today. Just wanted to thank you for listening, and thank you for providing a platform for us that helps us amplify our efforts and support that elusive hope and equity more broadly. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. Really appreciate it. Really excited to also welcome our next speaker, Natalie from Virginia Commonwealth University, to share some of the ways that they kind of helped overcome some of the challenges we've been discussing today as well.
Hi, everyone. So good to be with you today. I am Nicole Patterson. I'm an interim assistant director for student leadership and engagement at Virginia Commonwealth University. So pleased to be here with you today, and so pleased to have been able to work with Campus Votes Project so closely over the last few years on our fantastic Virginia State Coordinator, Madeline Doan, who we love and who's an alumni of our university. So I am joined here today by two students, Molly and Kelsey, who we'll hear from in just a moment. But I wanted to start and give you a general overview of our submission process and our goals that we've been working on for the last couple of years. So to give you some context before we dive in, Virginia Commonwealth University, we are a large public research institution in Richmond, Virginia, and our enrollment is about 32,000 students. And we have been working for the past several years with two different coalitions. We have a VCU Votes Student Coalition, who you'll hear from today, as well as a VCU Votes Advisory Council, which is made up of deans, directors, coordinators, and of course, students. And so through the work of these two groups and all of our partners, we were very successful in achieving the primary goals of our campus action plan that we outlined last year. And so we have two key goals that we're going to talk to you about today that we worked on. The first was building a more robust coalition infrastructure to strengthen the civic engagement and democratic learning happening on our campus. And the second that we'll talk to you a lot about, and our bullet points are referencing, is developing an effective communication plan about voter registration and absentee voting, specifically within the last year with COVID-19. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Molly Kalo, who is going to speak to us about our first goal.
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Kalo. I'm a senior at VCU, and I am the Director of Administration and the Director of Curricular Outreach for the VCU Votes Student Coalition. So our first goal, as Nicole said, was to build a more robust coalition infrastructure that really could strengthen our civic engagement. So we used our resources with the VCU Votes Advisory Council and the VCU Votes Student Coalition, which consisted of students, faculty, and staff across campus to really collaborate towards our goal of shared civic engagement. So to build a more robust coalition infrastructure, we focused on council and coalition infrastructure development, enhancing alumni engagement, and assessing student learning outcomes. So the VCU Votes Student Coalition is our student-led portion of our efforts. On this front, the student affairs administrators have capitalized on the grassroots efforts of active student organizers to work towards our shared vision. VCU Votes Student Coalition was formed in 2019 and is committed to creating a collaborative, inclusive, and engaged community on and off campus. VCU Votes is dedicated to breaking down barriers and increasing student awareness through civic engagement and democratic engagement work. In 2020, the coalition expanded to include additional leadership positions and a dedicated executive board. Our new executive board is co-chaired by an executive director of voter engagement, an executive director of membership, who work in collaboration with directors of partnership, communication, administration, curricular outreach, and co-curricular outreach. And the board was recruited, selected, and onboarded by the co-executive directors and a staff advisor.
Thank you so much, Molly. So that was just a quick snapshot of our building our coalitions and specifically some information about our student coalition. And now I will turn it over to Kelsey Russell to talk to you about some of our successes with our communication strategy in the last year.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kelsey Russell, and I'm currently a junior here at VCU. And I'm also serving as the Executive Director of Member Engagement for our Student Coalition. So our second goal, like Nicola talked about, was to develop an effective communication plan about voting amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So to do this, we had a couple of things that we did to effectively communicate our goals in voting throughout our campus. The first one is that we displayed QR codes around campus. So this led students directly to the Virginia Department of Elections website, where they could check their polling location, they could register to vote, and change their status, like change their address and everything. The next thing we did was we worked with the library to develop a how to register to vote guide. And this really allowed students, especially students that were at home during the pandemic, to figure out, how do I register to vote? Where do I go to register to vote? And kind of step-by-step show them, like, this is how I go to the website and register to vote, or how to do it paper pencil. The next thing that we did using the My VCU poll, which is a website on our campus, we did a poll where we asked students how they were going to vote this upcoming election in November 3rd, the past election. So we got to see if students were going to be voting that day, if they were going to be doing absentee voting, what percentage of students were going to be voting by mail. And that really gave us a large snapshot of how our students on our campus were voting. And with that, we found that only 8% of students who were eligible to vote did not report that they were unsure of how they were going to vote that year. So definitely was effective. And we could see that was really great to see how students were voting across the board. The next thing that we did is we sent out campus-wide text, social media posts through Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook to really inform voters on our campus about how they can vote, where they can vote, and about National Voter Registration Day. How they can get involved with National Voter Registration Day, and like why it's important to vote and why it's important for them to register to vote, and register to vote in Richmond as well. The next thing that we did is we created a video on why voting matters and why your vote matters, how not only at the presidential election, but in local elections as well, how your voice matters and how that can be an effective tool to get your voice heard. The next thing we did is we created a nonpartisan candidate guide so people could know who's going to be on the ballot this year and a little bit about what some other policy issues were for the different candidates. And then the last thing that we did is we shared resources for faculty members to share with their students about how to get involved civically and where they can vote and how they can register to vote as well.
Thank you so much, Kelsey and Molly. So I think that's about our time. We, again, are so grateful to Campus Votes Project for helping us to consider the ways that we can actualize our action plans and continue to engage our amazing student leaders like Kelsey and Molly as they mobilize voters on our campus and beyond. So thank you for the time to talk a little bit about our program. And yeah, that'll be it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, Molly, Kelsey. Really great stuff. Much appreciated. Glad to have you all on. I'm going to turn it back over to Cola and we'll talk some next steps.
All right, well, our first next step is to make sure we give some virtual reactions for the speakers. You all were very informative. And then after that, I would love for everybody to go and make sure that your campus has filled out your statement of interest form. We're dropping the link again in the chat. And we want to make sure that you are part of our next designation cycle. Now we also have a little bit of time for any other campuses who would like to share about their experiences in the 2020 election, some of the things that worked for you, or maybe some of the challenges that you had. You're welcome to go ahead and come off mute or raise your hand if you would like. Janae.
Yeah, I could talk about some of the stuff that the University of Texas at Austin struggled with and had to overcome in 2020. So we had been doing everything in person. Social media was neglected. Our website was ancient and not engaging at all. And we were able to, actually through money that we got from our state's voting summit, we were able to make a new website and post all of our voting, like education resources that we had made there. We started doing a text campaign we tried to do like not vote tripling, but basically the same concept, but with voter education outreach efforts. So your friend would reach out to you on campus and talk to you about how to vote and whether you're registered or not. We did that, and then we continued going into classes, but we did so virtually. We still had a presentation, and we would walk them through the many election procedural changes that happened in Texas and how they can make sure that they're following the law, but also making their voices heard. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Janae. Would anybody else like to share their experiences? Okay. If there are no other experiences to share for now, I do also want to let folks know that in our October VFC newsletter, we will be including a sign-up form where you can request getting a hard copy of our 2020 voter-friendly campus report. And then we will also be sharing out a digital version of that report as well. So please be on the lookout for that newsletter. If you haven't already signed on to be a part of it, you can join at the website www.voterfriendlycampus.org. All right, and Chuck, I think we can move on to the last portion here.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I see that Brian sent a question in the chat. I tried to attach Triple C's voting card in a JPEG format. If that doesn't work, just let me know. But if anybody else has any other questions, we can also answer those. Feel free to unmute or to type them in the chat.
So I don't think there are any other questions. I can follow up with Brian, and with that, thanks for coming, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.